The movie opens with a scene of a well-dressed man named Chris walking into a bar. He proposed to his girlfriend a day prior, and today he has managed to close the biggest deal of his career. With his life at its peak, he feels like the king of the world and wants to share his happiness with people. That's why he has come to the same bar where he made his first deal a long time ago. Since it is still daytime, the bar is almost empty, so he buys the bartender a shot of an expensive drink. He also sends the same drink to the only other customer in the bar, who is sitting on the counter looking shabby and depressed. The man is Barry, and a simple drink is not enough to turn his gloomy mood around. Determined to spread his jolly spirit, Chris declares that he would help Barry solve his problem. However, Barry is convinced that it is not a problem that can be solved by Chris, or anyone else for that matter. Chris is nothing if not persistent and insists that he can sort out Barry's problem. Because of Barry's reluctance, he proposes a bet. If he can solve whatever that Barry is worried about, then Barry must celebrate with him, but if not, then he would pay for Barry's drinks for the entire week. Despite his earlier protests, Barry is tempted by the attractive deal, so he ends up agreeing, but on the condition that he bears no responsibility for the effect Chris might have after hearing his story. Chris flippantly agrees, just so he could hear the story. And so Barry begins to recount the events of a few months ago when he had come up with a genuinely original idea and how his wife became the first victim of it. One regular morning, Barry woke up with a flash of light inside his eyes, followed by a mind-numbing headache. The headache was gone as soon as it came, and it was replaced by an idea. An idea so beautiful and unique that he urgently needed to share it with his wife. While having their morning coffee in the kitchen, he eagerly told her the idea. Hearing her husband's words, she was completely astonished as her eyes began to tear up in awe. The couple shared a moment, reflecting how different their lives would be with this knowledge. However, this moment was short-lived, as the idea was a little too mind-blowing for his wife. Shocked and disturbed, he was left standing alone in the kitchen with her blood splattered all over him. Of course, Chris has a hard time believing it because it is such a ridiculous story, but Barry insists that it is true. Chris retaliates by saying that this big of an incident would have made it to the news if it were true. Barry is insistent that the only reason that his wife's head mimicking a geyser did not make it in the news is because the CIA suppressed it. Hearing about the involvement of the CIA, Chris grows more annoyed by the lengths that Barry would go to lie about his impossible story. The scene then switches to the past, where Barry is being interrogated by the police. He is the prime suspect of his wife's supposed murder because he was the only one present at the time of her death. In addition, he has his wife's blood all over his body, which only adds to their suspicion. Even then, they cannot find any evidence of physical force to prosecute him for her murder. The police refuse to let him go that easily, and so a police officer is sent for an interrogation again. He demands a word-for-word account of what happened between Barry and his wife before her death. Faced against the imposing officer, Barry hides nothing and tells him everything that had happened, including his idea. Just like his wife, the police officer is spellbound by the idea for a moment, but before he could rejoice further, his brain forcefully ejects itself from its skull right before Barry, and once again, he is splattered with blood. Following this incident, Barry is forcefully detained inside a jail cell and handcuffed to a metal bed frame. He is scared and traumatized and believes that his life could not get any worse, but the worst has yet to come. One night, some people quietly enter his cell and forcefully cover his head with a sack. He is kidnapped from the jail by the CIA and taken to a secret location. There, he is forced to reveal his idea to multiple people through the course of a few weeks. He tells his idea to many people, starting with prisoners, and then the people begin to diversify and his victims grow to include scientists and psychiatrists. But the result remains the same, and none of them survive. As soon as he tells his idea to a person, their head just explodes after a few seconds. As time passes by, Barry grows more and more reluctant to speak, and the deaths begin to wear him down. But the CIA show him no mercy and continue to force him for their experiment. Back at the bar, Chris is still refusing to believe a single sentence of his story. From exploding heads to the CIA planting a tracking chip inside his arm, everything sounds like it came from a kid's imagination. This causes Chris and Barry to get into a heated argument. According to Chris, if Barry wants to make up a brilliant story, then he has to include believable things and not just blurt out wild, unbelievable fantasies. Barry insists on the legitimacy of his story. The reason why people's heads explode after listening to him is because his idea is so different that the human brain has nothing to compare it against. So it goes around in infinite loops to search for a place to slot that idea, which ends up overworking the brain and causes it to explode, like when a flat earther tries to think in 3 dimensions. Chris just laughs in frustration and tells Barry to create a better scam. Barry hates being called a liar, and the only way to prove his validity is to tell him the idea. He is still hesitant to reveal it to him, but when Chris mocks him again, Barry angrily agrees. The bartender, who is eagerly listening to their conversation, also chimes in because he wants to hear it too. Barry warns them again he holds no accountability for what would happen after he tells them the idea. The bartender and Chris ignore his warning again and urge him to start talking. And so, Barry talks and describes his idea in detail to the two of them. After he finishes speaking, the two men are left in awe. Barry's idea is completely original and unrelated to anything else that has ever existed. It has the potential to possibly change the world. Barry waits anxiously as their heads might explode anytime because it cannot contain the original idea. To his greatest surprise, both of them seem fine. Just as he is about to celebrate, the bartender's brain decides to break out from its calcium cage, leaving behind a bloody mess. But Chris is still alive. Barry cannot contain his happiness. There is someone who is immune to his idea, which means that he alone does not have to bear the burden. Also, since now he has found one immune person, there is a possibility that there might be more people who have the immunity. He is overflowing with excitement and quickly starts forming a plan to escape from the CIA together with Chris. Chris, on the other hand, is not nearly as thrilled as Barry. He is greatly disturbed by the bartender's death and asks why Barry is so casual about this situation. But Barry, who has faced numerous deaths similar to this, has grown completely numb to it and thinks that it was the bartender's fault for not listening to his warning. This makes Chris furious. Just to preserve his own pride and ego, Barry has killed the bartender and put such a heavy burden on Chris's shoulders. Barry once again states that it is a result of their stubbornness, and it makes Chris so enraged that he aims a shotgun at him. Barry is completely calm even when staring at the nozzle of the gun. It doesn't matter to him if he shoots, but Chris, who was just an oblivious fellow a few moments ago, cannot bring himself to take another man's life, so he decides to take his own instead. Just when Barry thinks that the situation has calmed down, Chris puts a gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. As his limp body falls on the floor with a thud, Barry is once again left alone to bear the weight of his idea. With the only ally he found gone within minutes of meeting him, Barry sits in the empty bar to drink while he sobs into his whiskey glass. And that's a wrap for this video recap. Thanks for watching.